Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Connolly, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, and I am joined today by training director Ryan Connolly. I feel like that makes you sound so official. Oh, if you guys are not watching, he is flexing. Wow. We're actually still in quarantine life, so unfortunately, we're not in the fancy office with the cool background. We are in our house if you're watching this, but if you're listening, you might not know the difference. There might be some kitchen noises as far as like the fridge going off, because sometimes it just does that. Honestly, when I'm by
it misses me.
Sometimes it'll just like randomly like drop an ice cube. I'll be like upstairs like, what the hell just happened? But in any case, we wanted to get all this out to you guys, and I'm really, really excited because we have a few podcasts lined up that are going to be all about training. And if you guys didn't see, last week, Rye actually put out a how to deadlift article on the Team LoCoFit site.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. And
like me.
Not like him. And he's actually going to do a how to squat and how to press article as well to follow up. And then we're actually going to do a podcast series on that, because there's tons of different variations. And then not only the variations, but how to start, how to make progress, and just all the different nuances kind of within that. Because obviously it was a really long article, like as far as written wise, but I think that talking through, we can answer some kind of commonly asked questions that we get, feet placement, like that kind of stuff. So, but today's topic actually is going to be what makes a good training program. And I'm really excited for this because obviously we write training programs, but we have, we help a lot of people out in the sense of, whether they're beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And there's a difference between training and then there's a difference of exercising, right? And I think we were actually, just funny story guys, we were talking for like 10 minutes and I didn't hit record. So this is the second time we're doing this.
It was hilarious. You had to be there.
I looked down to see what time it was and I was like, oh, we're not recording. But we were first making this distinction about training versus exercising. And a lot of people will go from being sedentary to just exercising, right? That means they're doing something. They're going into the gym or they're going outside and they don't necessarily have a plan, they don't have progression, and they're just kind of doing something. And that is absolutely better than doing nothing, right? We never want people to be completely sedentary. So if you're going for a walk, if you're doing some bodyweight push-ups and there's no progression, cool. But after you've done that for a little while, we really want people to understand how to train. And this goes for beginners as well. And this is not something that, I think a lot of people look at training and they think, oh, well, I'm not like an all-star athlete. Like I don't need a training program. But I would say that honestly, like it's kind of like nutrition. The basic 80% of it is going to be no matter what level you're at. And then that kind of top 20% is going to be like the very nuanced stuff that's specific for, let's say, an athlete or someone who has higher level goals. But everybody, in our opinion, should at some point learn proper training principles and how to put together a solid training program, whether it's for themselves or to coach other people. Because the biggest issue that we see as coaches are people coming to us and they're doing a lot of the wrong things. They're kind of haphazardly training, and most of the time they're getting hurt. And then what ends up happening is if people get hurt too many times, they just stop training altogether, and now they've gone backwards to being sedentary. So we would love for people to kind of get past that initial hurdle of like thinking that certain training programs are specific to them might only be for an advanced athlete. Would you agree?
Yeah. So, and what you said with like the 80% rule for like general fundamental stuff, that's absolutely 100% true. And it's also 100% true that most people don't even know what the fundamentals are. So if you're missing 80% of what's going on, then you're not going to be able to manipulate the easy variables that as a coach or as an experienced athlete or an experienced trainer or whatever would see. Then you are going to be unable to make those changes on your own, and you're not going to know why these things are occurring to you. So I've been trying to think this thought out. Actually, on the last time we tried to record this. Think this thought out.
Nice.
I've been trying to.
Didn't think that part through.
I've been trying to think this through, and exercise is a weird thing because you go into the gym and you see a lot of people in there doing stuff. So just like any other skill, There's people that are good at what they do. There's people that have no idea what they're doing. But you wouldn't just go into your car and start tearing your engine block apart without knowing what you're doing, and or having a friend with you that knows what they're doing with experience, and or having a mechanic do it. So walking into a gym and seeing a bunch of people exercising or working out, there's no reason. What are you doing? She's like pointing at herself.
Look at me.
Why would I look at you? So walking into a gym and seeing people exercise or working out is kind of confusing, because you're not sure if they actually know what they're doing or not, but they're in there moving, they're doing stuff, and a lot of times they're the same people that are in there for 10 years straight and they don't make any progress. So why would you want to go do that to yourself when you could have a fast track, you can learn the fundamentals, you can go to a personal trainer, you can go to a coach online, you can go to somebody that can be a resource for you and like teach you what you need to know and what's important and what the fundamentals are, and then you can go about your way and kind of learn from that, take from that, and do train how you want to train, and have a much more productive time in the gym. So
yeah, I was trying to use that like 80% rule, which again is just like a basic number, but as kind of a way to showcase that like it is, the foundations are really that important, but they're not that hard to grasp, right? Like if you have the foundations of a proper diet, if you have the foundations of a proper training program, they're really not as hard to implement as people think. Now, that last 20%, yes, that's a lot harder and a lot more detailed.
Implementing it is not as hard as being consistent with it.
Yeah, or sorry, the like barrier to entry isn't as high, I think, as some people think. But they think, oh, I don't need to learn that because that's only for really advanced people. It's like, no, learning just like the basic fundamentals of diet and nutrition.
That's everything.
Is everything. And then you can specialize if you want to. So don't look at it as this really daunting thing that you don't need to do. And it's actually going to really benefit you. And you're going to see so much more progress. You're going to feel better. You're not going to be beat up all the time. And again, the injury thing is really something that's huge. Of course, everybody gets plagued with injuries, even if you do know what you're doing. But it is something that we can actively avoid if you have a proper training program. So let's kick this off with GPP.
So for those who don't know what GPP is, that is a acronym for General Physical Preparedness. So the general physical preparedness of a person or a human or an athlete is, are you in shape? So that's a general scalable tool that we're going to use as, can you get through a workout without dying? Are you going to be on the ground sweating to death in a puddle of your own feces? Are you going to be able to train?
Wow, that's going quickly.
It'll happen. Are you going to be able to,
like yesterday, I was,
are you going to be able to recover from the training? Like basically, are you in a place that you are capable of exercising? So if we were looking at a 70-year-old female that's never worked out before, and she's been an office secretary her entire life and doesn't do a lot of physical movement, her general physical preparedness is going to be very low as compared to a high school athlete who's in the middle of season playing basketball. So the fundamental is going to be...
Don't talk about my grandma like that.
So the fundamental of what we're going to look at is, well, your grandma even danced, so she's got something going on for her. The fundamental, this is going to be the base of the pyramid. So you have to be at least in some kind of shape to be able to recover from training, to be able to get through a training session. If you can't train, you're not in good enough shape to train, then we're not going to really be able to do much. So if that's missing, we're going to have to build that floor, and it's going to be a low base, but that would actually be your exercise and your training is getting in shape. So for athletes, I would say that if you're at like 90% of your best, then you're at a trainable condition. That's a good rule of thumb. So
what would be some examples of GPP for, obviously most of our clients, let's say, would have hypertrophy goals and or strength goals?
Just general, I would just say that it would be a overall fundamental grasp of having some kind of aerobic capacity, having some kind of maximal limit strength, which is going to be like a 1 rep max strength, having some kind of muscular hypertrophy, having some kind of flexibility, mobility, and basically being able to use those in everyday life and in a situation that would require you to have to push your limits a little bit, and you would be fine. So that's what I would say is what you would look for in someone, like if they're able to train or not. If they could go sprint after the garbage truck to give them the garbage can, then I think they're okay. That's going to be a general physical capacity.
And then if somebody has, let's say they're just like, wow, like I'm really not in good shape, like I haven't been training consistently, they might do some things, but it's just going to be, let's just say, very low threshold here.
Yeah.
this, you would start with a lot more general.
Yeah, general stuff. Walking, getting their nutrition right, just general body weight exercises, calisthenics, doing things that are going to be quote unquote challenging to them, and it's also going to be dependent on where their weaknesses are. So if their lungs and aerobic capacity and cardiovascular health is like way out of shape, then we might need to do a little bit more circuit training or something like that along those lines. If their endurance is really good, like they've been a long distance runner for a long time, and their muscular hypertrophy or their limit strength sucks, like they can't deadlift their body weight, then we're gonna have to do stuff like that. So it's also going to be specifically bringing up what general characteristics you're weak at. So we're going to pinpoint what you're missing, and it might be everything, and it might just be one thing. So it could be a year of training, or it could be a month of training, or a couple weeks. So,
and then next is going to be specificity.
So specificity, just like what I touched on before, if you could be a marathon runner, or you could be a competitive powerlifter or a bodybuilder. All of those things are going to require specific adaptations that are going to make you successful at your sport. So the majority of your training is going to be based on these either physiological energy systems or types of training that are going to allow you to be successful in your competitive events. Now, at the same time, we're always going to need to keep up some of the GPP, the general physical preparedness, so that you don't get hurt. So even as a power lifter, we like incorporating some of the 10-minute walks that Stan Efferding has. I'll sometimes do cardio blocks, doing 20 minutes on a treadmill or something, and it's nothing crazy. Like, that's literally that's cardio to me as a competitive powerlifter. I stay in good enough shape to where I can still fight fires, and I'm out there very actively on fire grounds when we have structure fires, and I'm a 250-pound dude. So I'm maintaining a good enough general physical capacity to be able to still succeed at my specific sport of limit strength or powerlifting. And the same thing would go for the opposite end of the spectrum. This is just easy to talk about because it's total polar opposites. A marathon runner still needs to be able to maintain some kind of maximal strength. So he's going to go compete in the Boston Marathon, but you're still going to be able to need to probably, I would say, deadlift your body weight. And I would think that someone that can deadlift twice their body weight would be even better ultimately, because they're going to have more of a forceful more force they're producing into the ground, which is going to allow them to essentially glide instead of run or pitter patter across the earth. You are putting more force into the ground, which is going to basically, fast running is jumping. You're jumping extremely far distances for a long period of time. So if you can produce more force for a longer period of time, you're going to run further.
And then within specificity, I think that it's important to understand that, so say you have, you know, goals like for you, like powerlifting or marathon running or bodybuilding, whatever.
Yeah, we should definitely touch on bodybuilding. Forgot about that one.
Yeah, kind of important for most of our clients. Is you can still, not, we're gonna talk about periodization too at the end, but you can go through different periods of this. So just because you're a powerlifter doesn't mean that you only ever lift really heavy weights, right? Yeah. And just because somebody might be having a bodybuilding focus doesn't mean that they only lift high volume, right? Like you can change the blocks and you can do, and so even though you have a specific goal, you still have to understand how to change this and periodize it.
Yeah. So for bodybuilding, what do you want to touch on? Do you want to just touch on the best ways? We're not going to get into periodization, but basically bodybuilding is, as we all know, increasing muscular size and hypertrophy. The cool thing about bodybuilding is getting yoked. The cool thing about bodybuilding is that you can do a wide range of exercises. You can do a very wide range of rep ranges, of intensities.
It's kind of like the widest, I would say, right? Like there's so many ways to hypertrophy versus, you know, obviously like strength is a little bit more specific, particularly for strength.
You have to
sports.
do the special exercise. You have to do it at a certain percentage of your 1RM.
Yeah, literally bodybuilding, any kind of hypertrophy training, you can pretty much make anything almost hypertrophy related. Not obviously not anything, but there are no specific things. So that is one cool thing about it.
And there's nuances to it, but you can do a wide variety of things that'll work for a lot of people. Or you can do a wide variety of things, and you can pinpoint and pick and pull which things are going to work best for the athlete that you're working with or for yourself. So for, we were touching on bodybuilding, and then what was the periodization type stuff?
Well, that was not next.
Just kidding. Sorry, get ahead of myself.
Sorry, I have the notes laid out. All right, guys. These were Ryan's notes, by the way. And the next would be just progressive overload, which is one of the things that's lacking, I think, the most in a lot of programs. And it's particularly programs, basically the thing that I see all the time is, you know, and again, this is not to
say it.
Okay, I know, I'm trying to formulate it properly. So a lot of times, like let's say you go on Instagram, right, and you see workouts, and sometimes that's why I don't even like sharing sometimes my workouts, because you don't understand like the context of it, right? And the whole point of it is not to share every little detail of my training life, because that's like, okay, a little, first of all, nobody cares.
People care. I care.
You know what I mean? You definitely care most. But let's just say, like, even within that context, right, it gets hard to share kind of what you're doing, unless you're posting like a training log every single day and going into all these details. So what people end up seeing is that they end up just seeing these workouts, right? And then sometimes people don't even have any kind of progressive overload. They're just going in there and, air quotes, exercising, right? Which again is fine up until a certain point. So what ends up happening is that clients come to us and they say, oh, I'm not reaching my goals. I'm not growing X body part. I'm not getting stronger. I'm not getting faster, whatever their goals are. And it's typically because they do not have any kind of progressive overload, which in the hypertrophy world, people think progressive overload only means more sets, reps, weights, etc. But there can just overload in general. And that's what we want to talk about here. Yeah.
So while we're on bodybuilding and hypertrophy stuff, overload, I would say there's two major categories of it. There is short-term overload and there is long-term overload. What is going to be successful to the athlete is obviously long-term overload. You're looking year after year, month after month to make strides in your muscular hypertrophy or the amount of reps that you can do on dumbbell bench press, whatever it is. Like, you have some kind of measurable scale that you can see that you're improving on. You can see the mirror changing. So there's not a direct one-to-one correlation between strength training and hypertrophy, but it's the best thing that we have to work off of, given the tools and the resources that we currently have. If I can go out there and I can bench press 450 pounds and I could only bench press 400 pounds last year, there's a pretty damn good chance that I have a bigger upper body, pecs, delts, triceps, upper back than what I had last year. So it's not a one-to-one correlation to where you're just going to always see that transfer, but it's a really good measurable scale as when you're looking at something for rep per rep, and everything is close variables. You're not changing too much. Like, you're just looking at one format, and that's if you can do a certain amount of reps for 5 reps. In a couple of years, if you can do more reps at that same weight, then you're probably bigger. So that's going to be long-term overload. Within the context of a microcycle or a weekly training cycle, you're going to want to try and, ideally you want to try and make it a little bit harder every week. It's not going to happen, but that's what your goal is always going to be. It's not going to happen, but that's what your goal is always going to be, and you're going to do it within the context of not totally, not injuring yourself. We don't want to just push the weight or push the intensity just for the sake of pushing the intensity. You're gonna have to train hard. That's like I think that goes without saying. I think that you need to train your ass off, but you need to do it within the context of trying to not get hurt. So we have those two forms of overload in resistance training, and as far as any other type of training program, overload again is going to be the same principles. You're just going to not look at it exactly as adding weight to the bar or sets of reps, whatever. With like some of the aerobic training Lauren's been doing, she's overloading by doing more total work time under tension of aerobic training, whether that's during the circuits or that's on her bike doing intervals. And eventually maybe we can start lowering the rest periods. So that is going to be a form of overload training. And that's one of the things that I think people skip over or kind of misunderstand the concept or misapply, is it doesn't just have to be what Lauren said earlier, sets times reps or weights. You can overload and make things more intense as you go along, as you progress as an athlete, and that should happen in the short term as much as you can, but obviously in the long term, that's what's going to make you advance as an athlete.
Yeah, so for like example, I've been doing these aerobic circuits and they're 5 minutes of work and then it's 3 to 5 minute rest. And I started with 4 of them, 4 circuits, 4 or 5 circuits, 3 to 5 minutes. And then the first week we did it just with that. Then I did a little bit of biking, but it was just kind of
It was like traditional hit, like
just,
30 on, 30 off.
I did like some quick sprints or just like some steady state. And then Ryan was like, we'll continue to do this the same, basically add this to the training block, like 5 minutes on, 3 minutes off. So I added 2 of those. So now the second week I did it, I added 2 more 10 more minutes of work. And I did even notice on some of them, I did the shorter rest period and I was fine. I was recovered, even in a week. So, it's not, again, it's, and I want to give people like that practical example because sometimes it's like hard to conceptualize, especially like aerobic or sport type training. It's just a little bit different because most people are like such meatheads. They're used to like, oh, I did 35 pounds and I got to do 40. And yes, that's very easy. But for anything else outside of that, it's a little bit harder. Now, we did want to talk about manipulation of training variables. And kind of what are your thoughts on that? Like after basically like you have these basic principles.
You wrote it in blue.
I thought that was next. All right. Ryan's calling me out, guys. Sorry. Individuality. Go.
Be yourself, dude.
Yeah,
just be you.
That's what we really wanted to add to this podcast, and we thought it'd be really valuable information to just be yourself. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
So this may or may not go before the training variables, but basically what you're going to see is you have fundamental things that you can manipulate. You have the GPP, you have specificity, you have all these things that we touched on already, overload. But you also have the individual person. So you're looking at them and who they are as a person. You're going to look at their injury history, what their sport is, what their goals are, where they're at currently, where they want to be in the long term. And you're going to take all these things, their limb length, their muscular hypertrophy, whatever it is. You're going to look at all these variables and you're going to assess them as an individual, a perfect little snowflake. And you're going to take these general ideas and these general rules, and you're going to apply them to that person in front of you. Now, again, like Lauren said earlier, a lot of it is the 80-20 principle, but the individual is where the 20% lies. So if they're not able to recover from the training or they don't look right doing a certain exercise, it just doesn't jive with them. There could be reasons for that. It could be a technical execution reason, or it could just be that it's a lift that doesn't work well for their biomechanics. So these are what you're going to need to look at for yourself or as a coach, and you're going to need to fine tune some of these things. That's where the details come in, and the individual is going to be the ability to change the individual to the training towards the individual is just as important as the 80%.
And that's where coaching comes in. And that's why it's important. And that's why we ask feedback, and we ask almost obnoxious feedback as far as like all the questions that we ask, but it's all important. And that's why it's hard when people say, oh, hey, so should I do 4 sets for hypertrophy? Well, maybe not. And outside of just like the actual training day, we have to look at the day, we have to look at the week, we have to look at the month, we have to look at your life, your recovery.
Lifestyle.
Did you, are you traveling every week? Do you have 3 kids? Are you in college? Are things pretty chill? Like you have a pretty routine day? Did you just, there's so many variables.
Were you a competitive athlete for 10 years before at an Olympic level? Like you're going to be able to handle a lot more workload.
Yeah. Or did you just start lifting a few years ago? And also just how people, and that this is again where the individualization comes in, and this is obviously important for nutrition too, but how do people just handle things, right? So some people, are going to be able to handle a lot more for training, and other people get thrown off easier, and that's okay. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It simply just is
making sure that it works for you.
Exactly. And we're never going to say like, oh, squats are the best exercise ever. All of our clients have to do them all the time. Well, that's terrible advice. You know what I mean? Like a squat movement pattern, which we'll get to for that podcast, is one of the best things around, but there's so many ways to execute a squat. It doesn't necessarily have to be one way and one way only. And it doesn't mean that you have to be doing those constantly and breaking somebody down every single week. So individuality is so important. And again, that's more of that 20%. You can get away with the basics, but if you really want to take it to that kind of next level, that's really where that comes in. So
as some of you may know, I've been competing in powerlifting for 9 years now, I think. I barely ever competitive back squat. Like my actual setup of a low bar, competition bar on my back, squatting in that manner. Now that might be sound surprising to a lot of people, but it beats the hell out of me. My arms can't stand it. My shoulder mobility is not good enough. It wrecks me. So if I were to do someone else's training program that just back squats even once a week, every week, I would not be able to recover from that in the same manner that they would, and my bench would suffer, my squat would suffer, and it's something that is going to be an individual principle to me, so I have to work around that and use variations on the squat. And that's totally fine. It's just you have to understand what your limitations are, you have to understand what the athlete's limitations are, and be able to prescribe something that will work for them. And then when we have this is actually goes on the point of manipulating the training variables. And it could just be as simple as dropping a couple sets. They might not be able to handle 5 working sets of squats in a training session. They might only be able to handle 3.
Or even days per week. That's a big variation.
Changing the frequency. Or even it can be the amount of weight on the bar. Some athletes do not respond very well to heavy weights. Some respond well.
I'm raising my hand if anybody can't see.
Some respond great to higher rep stuff. Those are going to be training variables that you're going to have to manipulate for yourself or for the client. What are some other things with that?
I would say the biggest thing I think is frequency and just recovery.
Yeah. So, and what you need too, because
of course.
If you are coming to me as a bikini athlete and you need hamstrings and glutes, I'm not going to have you overhead pressing 4 times a week or doing lateral raises. That's just a waste of energy. It's a waste of resources. So it might take a bit. Goal? It depends on the goal, and it depends on where you're at right now, what the goal is, and what you can do. So for the most part, I always start people on an average program, and then we go from there. So we can see what you can and can't handle. We can see what you respond well to, and then as the competitive athlete or the season goes on, or we see what needs to develop, then we can plug and play and kind of get more specific on what you do need. If you need bigger, more rounder delts, we're going to do more delt work.
Yeah, or what somebody even likes more, because we work with a lot of clients who are just lifestyle clients, and this goes the same for nutrition as well, and for their goals. And I think it's a big misconception that if you don't have like this very, very ultra specific goal, you shouldn't have any kind of specific nutrition or training. And that's just not true, because for the most part, people want to look good. They want to feel good. They want to like train hard and like feel okay in the gym. You know what I mean?
It's pretty easy. Do some resistance training.
Yeah.
Do some cardio and you'll be set. But you just have to know what to do.
And you have to understand that feedback. So like the biggest issue that I think that we see, particularly because we coach mostly women, is they want to do more all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And I don't know many people who can recover, truly recover. They say they're recovering, they say they want to go to the gym, but honestly that's more of a psychological issue that I've had to work with a lot of clients on. Is it becomes this like obsession that they have to go to the gym, they have to move it. I have to hit 15,000 steps a day, I have to work out 6 days a week, I have to do active recovery and go on it's like it never ends. And it's like, okay, well, we need to dive into further what these issues are, because if you were to say to somebody who's in a psychologically distressed place, hey, we're just going to train 4 days a week, someone might literally like lose it. And that's, again, a totally different conversation, not for this podcast, but really like looking at like true recovery and actual progress. Because even if you maybe think that you're recovering because you feel okay, do you look any different? Are you any stronger? Do you feel any better in what you're trying to do? Like those are all that's feedback that we actually need. And then lastly, just kind of a little bit on periodization. Like, so we talked about some basic principles for a good training program, and obviously we could maybe do another podcast, just deep dive on this if people want to hear it, but just lightly touch on kind of periodization and how that kind of changes.
This is even a nuanced topic between professionals and what periodization even is.
Oh yeah, that's can of worms we just opened up.
But what periodization is to me, and I think I'm right, is periodization is the changing of manipulation of training variables over the course of months or years. You're just not going to do the same exact thing years on end and have results. It's just not going to happen. Now, where the nuances come in is the length of time that you're doing what I would call a training cycle or a block of training, and if you're going to manipulate variables week to week or session to session, and those are small variables, like say we're doing the same exact exercises for 4 weeks and we're just going to change the sets and reps every week. We're going to just do a linear periodization where you're doing something for 10 reps week 1, 8 reps week 2, 6 reps week 3, etc. That would be one way of going about it. Or you can just keep a flat line of loading, and you would do 3x10 the entire time, and all we're trying to do is reduce the RPE or add a little bit of weight every time we walk in. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can go about this, but periodization in and of itself is a very simple concept that has gotten very complicated from scientists and people that are, you know, in the weeds with this stuff. But on it at a face value, face value, it is just changing your training variable when it needs to change. If you're training and you're run the hell down, you're beat up, you're not making progress anymore, then you need to stop. So, and that is a very simple way of looking at it. And I do look for those variables in my clients, and I see, are they mentally there? Are they emotionally invested? Are they disciplined? If their discipline is not an issue and they're committed and they're going to go regardless of how they feel, are they beat up? Are they not able to perform the same way that they had been performing during the remainder of this block? Like if their performance has dropped down, then there's an issue. And that's when you need to take a step back. You need to deload, you need to reduce the volume, reduce the workload, allow them to recover. And then you change the training variables and you do it all over again. So simply that's periodization. It's not that complicated. It's just using all of these other things that we've previously talked about to make a training cycle, and then take a step back and then do it all over again, and you do that for 10 years and you're good.
And
now.
then maybe you have some muscles. But the whole point of the periodization, and again, we could totally do more if people want that, right? But for the purposes of this, I wanted to basically just touch on that and say
linear periodization, concurrent periodization, conjugate periodization, block periodization.
Yeah. Basically all to say you're not going to be doing the same thing all the time. And that is part of a training program, is to periodize it. There's going to be times where even if you are the same person with the same goals, you're going to be doing heavier blocks, right? Hey, I'm doing more weight, less reps. There's going to be blocks where you're doing less.
Yeah.
Less weight, higher reps. There's going to be blocks where you're doing, hey, let's do a little bit more aerobic conditioning because for what you're trying to do right now, you need to get in better shape. So that was really what I wanted to kind of round it out with.
That's very important, though, just as a novel stimulus in and of itself. Doing something different, for some reason, the brain responds to it well, and you have a spike of interest in the body, or the mind in the body, the athlete themselves. If they're more interested in training, they're going to train harder. So if you're able to change these variables at you're changing the variables, but you're making changes at a physiological level because their body is not used to it. You have to force adaptations. Now they have to do something different, and you're also spiking their interest because they're doing something different. Now the time frame is going to be what's different for all, or is going to change for each person. But overall, that is something that's a very important topic, or it's a very important idea. Is not just changing stuff for the sake of changing things, like randomly all the time. It's not needed, but changing things is a very important tool, and it's something that we can't totally measure all the time. So it's gotten overused by people that don't know what they're doing, but it's also an underutilized tool, I think, in some of the scientific community that only requires proof of data. So I think that it's an important concept. And
that's where people always say, like, coaching is an art and a science. And I think that, you have to use science as the backbone of these training principles, but then the art part of it comes for, when is it time to change something? And that's where getting feedback from your clients is so important. And if you are doing some kind of individualized program, and even on something like we have Body Blueprint, which is our monthly training subscription, and those people are not checking in with us. It's just hey, here's a monthly training subscription that you have, but we're still periodizing that based on all the things that you've learned from coaching people and your own training about roughly when we need to make changes to things and when we need to periodize them.
Yeah.
So I think that, that is where the art part of coaching and programming comes in, and it's not just so black and white. Hey, squat 3x10 this week and then change it next week.
That's funny because it's actually harder for me to do the Body Blueprint sometimes because I don't have the individual
for sure.
in front of me, or I don't know what they're doing. I don't have contact with them. Like, I'm trying to make a mass program for a bunch of people, so I have to rely on a lot of these general principles that we talked about before without me having a face to look at or any feedback from an individual person. I get some feedback from some of the guys that do, some of the people that do the program, and that's awesome. I appreciate it. But it's much harder for me personally to sit down and write that with just a blank template in front of me and not knowing all of these other variables. So,
but that's what we made that program to gear towards the 80%. And that was what we wanted to do, and we've had really great feedback from it. So if you are interested, that opens up at the end of every month, and basically it is a 4 to 5 week block depending on the month that you sign up, because there are programmed deloads in there as well.
And there's also weeks that aren't programmed deloads if it's necessary that I'll taper or like start something. If it's starting a new block or there was a test week or something, it'll always work. It
always makes sense, and the goal is that we wanted to provide something of value, high value, that was actually intelligently programmed at a low cost. So if you guys are interested, you can go on our site, teamlocofit.com, and under the programs tab, there is its own webpage for Body Blueprint. And if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're never too busy to help, and you can go to our website, and there's a contact button there, send us an email, and we will get back to you. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you want to hear more about specific training stuff and you have questions for myself or Rye, please reach out, let us know, and we will definitely record another one.